I know we all certainly want to express our appreciation to everyone who participated in the decorating efforts this past week, especially yesterday. It is a great blessing for us to be surrounded by the added beauty of the season. Our scripture today comes to us from the book of the prophet Isaiah in the 9th chapter. This brief passage begins and ends with words that are quite familiar to us. The couple of verses in between might be new, because over the years we have reached in and grabbed this verse and grabbed this verse, but not told this full story. So I'll be reading the words in yellow and invite you to read aloud together the words in white print. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned.
You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder.
For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire.
For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
Those living in deep darkness, on them light has shined. It was September 27, 1987, and part of me really regrets that I have memories that old. But this was the day in which my wife suffered a miscarriage. And we became one of the many people who understood more completely what that meant. For us, it was unexpected to learn that we were expecting. And yet we received it joyfully. And though the miscarriage occurred very, very early, we had just enough time to imagine what it would be like. Just enough time to dream about the child that would be born. Just enough time to pick out names. And it was truly our first great personal loss. And people tried to say something, you know what that's like, some of it appropriate, some of it not so appropriate, all of it well-intentioned, some of it not very helpful at all. But it was two older, we call them widow women, right, who had come up to the porch of the house, and they didn't knock, and they didn't ring a bell, they didn't want to intrude upon our sadness and grief. But each of them left on the porch a vase with a single rose in it. These are the people who brought light into our darkness. And we all have those kinds of stories of those who bring the light into the darkness. And without them, how could we have possibly survived? It was about 2,700 years ago. The Assyrians had risen to great power and had overwhelmed the northern kingdom of Israel, annihilating them. The people in the southern kingdom of Judah, there around the capital city of Jerusalem, had known all about it. They complete victory had occurred 20 years earlier. Many of them had seen, they had certainly heard about the utter destruction, the bloody, endless battles, the total defeat. And they themselves had been threatened by the Assyrians, who with a great army could come in and overwhelm them whenever they felt like it. Whenever something else wasn't more important, and they decided now's a good time to go annihilate Judah. They were living in a land of deep darkness, not only because of their ancestral brothers and sisters who had been destroyed to the north, but because they were confident it was coming their way. And as difficult as it is when any one of us is going through a time of darkness, can you imagine when the entire community, when the entire nation is going through such deep darkness? Where do you turn for hope? Where do you turn for light when everyone's living in the same fear, the same grief, the same anticipation of destruction? The king in Jerusalem was Hezekiah. Hezekiah had seen with his own eyes the destruction in the northern wars, the victory of Assyria, the brutality of the battlefield. Hezekiah found a way to make peace with Assyria. He paid tribute. Here's gold, leave us alone. And then he embarked on years of great reform within the temple and the practice of faith. It became a time of spiritual reformation for them. The people's hearts were lifted. The towns, the cities grew. They knew prosperity. They knew a closer connection to God. They escaped the darkness of devastation and saw the light. It was a reasonably brief period of time, 15 years, a speck in human history, but for them, each day, each year, was a time of great light, a great rejoicing, a great celebration. Hezekiah became one of the most celebrated kings since David and Solomon. And Bible scholars are fairly confident that when Isaiah wrote these words in chapter 9, he was speaking about Hezekiah. That Hezekiah was the king, the wonderful counselor, the Prince of Peace, the one who saved us from utter destruction, the one who brought this great light of salvation to us. It was 1,000 years later before Christian scholars and theologians looked back upon this passage and began to see it as a prophecy of the Christ. And they began to interpret in their eyes in spiritual terms that just as Hezekiah was salvation for Jerusalem in his day, that Christ would be salvation for the world in his day and beyond. A great light shining upon the darkness. And it has been our understanding as people of faith since then that we carry that same light. That It helps identify who we are. Every once in a while, national media notices things that we've known all along. And as we've even spoken about in recent weeks, one of the things that they suddenly discovered this year was that there's an addiction crisis in this country. And it's good to have them on board to see what we have seen. A land of deep darkness. One of the most fitting descriptions of a life of addiction. And we spoke just a couple of weeks ago about some of the mechanisms at work in the human psyche, in the brain, in our psychology, that helps perpetuate the darkness. Our self-deceptions that keep us from seeing the light, from understanding the truth. We talked about denial and repression and rationalizations and hiding and delaying tactics. What I didn't mention specifically is that those mechanisms are not only generally present in the life of a person who's fallen into a compulsive lifestyle, but they're essentially contagious, because you'll often see the same things happening within the immediate family and friends. The inability to see what's really going on. The inability to realize something needs to change. The inability to actually change it. Someone needs to shine a light on the denial so that people can see the reality. Someone needs to shine a light on the repression so people will quit pretending that it's all okay. Someone needs to shine a light on the rationalizations to see how they're just lies that allow us to continue self-destruct. Someone needs to shine a light on those who are hiding so that they might come out and receive help. Someone needs to shine a light on the delaying tactics to remind people that we don't have forever. None of us do. But in our culture, and sadly even within a significant portion of Christian heritage, the light that we have been shining on those suffering with compulsive behavior has been a light of shame and judgment, condemnation, and dismissal. Let's put them in jail so we don't have to deal with them. Let's call them names and not associate with them. Let's blame them for their own illness and compulsions. Let's separate from them so that we don't somehow get stained by associating with them. Somehow the light that our culture has been shining upon this community of addiction and recovery, somehow the light we shine has made it darker. And so it's only understandable then that if I discover I have some compulsive behavior, finally something breaks through and I understand that I need to change before it's too late, that after hearing and feeling the condemnation of the community around me, sometimes in the name of God, that I'm reluctant to come out into the open. resistant to seeking help. As if I weren't reluctant and resistant enough. Somehow the light that we've shone upon it has chased people further into the darkness. And here, Central Christian Church, we are still in the midst of giving birth to a new way, a new light, a new hope, shining a light of acceptance, shining a light of compassion and care, shining a light of understanding upon people who are suffering enough, hoping to change this stigma that we place upon people. I mean, most of us wouldn't think of blaming someone and shaming someone because they had a cold. You know, colds, if you don't go to a doctor, it takes 2 weeks to get over them. But if you do go to the doctor, you get it settled in 14 days. And yet, it is true, sometimes we do even shame people for their colds. You went out without a hat, didn't you? You went out without a coat, didn't you? Something within us that can't seem to quit blaming people for what they are having to live with. We certainly like to blame the drug user. And there's a little truth to it. We like to blame the alcohol user. There's a little truth to it. But I can promise you, no one ever started using a drug or started drinking alcohol in hopes and anticipation of ruining their lives. We shed light upon them. Wherever you are, whatever you're dealing with, we have compassion. We're hoping to build a better community with greater understanding, ready to respond to needs and help people make very difficult changes. We're trying to put a new face on Christ, not one of self-righteous judgment, but one of care and compassion. And if we manage to help one person, it will be a wonder and a great joy. But one thing it won't be is easy. We are here to try to shine some Advent light onto the world, to help them see in a new way, to help them be a new kind of people. And we're going to start with ourselves, hoping to learn more about the situations personally, hoping that we will learn how best to respond, trying to discover how we can play a role, however much in the background or however much on the sideline, to simply be supportive of this effort to bring Christ to light in the world of deep darkness. It sounds like the God thing to be doing. And it's exciting that we've come to see it for ourselves. Let us pray. How many times, oh God, have you shone a light upon us, helping us to see what we needed to see, even and especially when we didn't want to see it? How many times have you shown us love when we didn't think it was there. A path to peace that we thought was now impossible. A source of joy when we thought all joy had left the world. A true, living hope when we were about to give up. Continue to pour out your blessing upon each of us individually. Be a powerful source of joy and hope in our families. Be a guide to us as congregation, as people of faith, here ready and willing to shine your light upon the world. Bless our efforts, O God. Let the light penetrate the darkness. In Jesus' name.